There is a moment, captured on a researcher's field camera deep in the forests of central India, that stops everyone who sees it cold. A Royal Bengal tiger, one of the most powerful predators on Earth, moves through dappled light between the sal trees. It is enormous. Its shoulders are thick with muscle. Its paws leave prints the size of dinner plates in the soft mud beside a forest stream. It has ruled this territory for 3 years without challenge, and then the Dholes arrive. What happens next would be replayed in university lecture halls, studied frame by wildlife biologists, and shared among researchers who had spent decades in the field. Some of them said they had never seen anything like it. Others said it changed how they thought about predator dynamics in the subcontinent entirely. A pack of wild dogs, each one no heavier than a medium-sized Labrador, facing down a creature that could kill a Gao with a single bite to the spine, and the tiger backing away. If you have ever wanted to understand what raw collective intelligence looks like in the animal kingdom, what pack law actually means when tested against the very apex of the food chain, stay right here. And if you find yourself as gripped by this as the scientists who pored over that footage, hit subscribe, because this is the kind of story we live for. The Indian wild dog, the dhole, Cuon alpinus. Even the name feels like it belongs to something ancient, something that predates the neat categories we use to understand the natural world. These animals are not wolves, they are not foxes, they are not anything quite so familiar. They belong to their own genus, a lineage that branched away from other canids millions of years ago and evolved in near total isolation across the forests and grasslands of South and Southeast Asia, and in that isolation they became something extraordinary. A single dhole weighs between 12 and 20 kilograms. That is a modest animal. That is an animal a leopard would kill without particular effort. That is an animal a tiger would not even register as a threat, and yet dholes have been documented chasing leopards from kills. They have been documented harassing sloth bears. They have been documented doing what that camera captured in the sal forests, driving a tiger off its own ground. How does this happen? How does an animal that size do what no single predator of comparable weight could ever dream of doing? The answer lies in something that took millions of years to perfect, and it is not strength, and it is not speed, and it is not size. It is something far more difficult to evolve, and far more powerful once it exists. It is coordination. It is what happens when individual animals stop being individuals and become something else entirely. Before we get into the footage, into what the cameras recorded and what the scientists made of it, it helps to understand the dhole on its own terms, to understand what this animal is, where it came from, and why it is built the way it is. The dhole's coat is a rich rufous red, deeper and more saturated than a red fox, with a paler underside and a dark bushy tail. Its muzzle is relatively short and broad compared to other canids, giving it a more powerful bite relative to its size than a wolf. Its teeth are unusual. Dholes have one fewer molar on each side of the lower jaw than most other members of the dog family, which might sound like a disadvantage until you understand what it means for the shape of the jaw and the shearing force it can generate. These are animals built to process meat quickly and efficiently in open environments, to feed fast and move fast, because in their world, time spent at a kill is time spent vulnerable. Their feet are another clue to their character. Dholes are built for endurance. They can cover enormous distances at a canter, maintaining speeds that would exhaust most prey animals over distance. They do not rely on the explosive ambush that cats use. They are coursing predators, pursuit hunters, animals that identify their quarry and then simply do not stop. They have been tracked pursuing sambar deer for distances of over 10 kilometers through dense forest. They work in relay formations, individuals dropping back to recover, while fresh pack members take the front, maintaining pressure on prey until it slows, until it makes an error, until it simply has no more to give. And through all of that they are talking to each other, not in the way a wolf pack howls, not in the way a lion pride rumbles and grunts, Dholes communicate through a sound that has no real parallel in the animal world. A high-pitched whistle, almost musical, almost melodic, that carries through dense forest with remarkable clarity. Field researchers who have worked with dholes for years describe moments of listening to a pack moving through forest cover, invisible, and piecing together their positions and intentions purely from those whistles. A rising cadence when prey is sighted, a sharp repetition when the pack needs to converge, a softer exchange when animals are resting or regrouping after a hunt. This acoustic communication is one of the keys to understanding how dholes do what they do, because coordination in the chaos of a hunt, in broken terrain, in dense vegetation, with prey that is panicking and unpredictable, and sometimes dangerous, requires more than instinct. It requires real-time information sharing. It requires the ability to tell your packmates not just where you are, but what you are seeing and what you need them to do. The pack in our story numbered 14 animals. That is a substantial pack. Dhole groups vary enormously in size. Some consist of just a handful of related individuals, a breeding pair and their offspring from 1 or 2 seasons. Others, in areas with abundant prey and stable territory, can number 20 or more. 14 is large enough to be genuinely formidable, but small enough that every member's contribution to a hunt is essential. There is no deadweight in a dhole pack. Every animal has a role. The territory this pack occupied covered roughly 80 square kilometers of mixed deciduous forest in the central Indian highlands. It was good country for them. The forest held substantial populations of chital, sambar, and barking deer. There were wild pigs along the stream margins. The pack had denned in this area for at least 2 consecutive seasons, which the researchers monitoring them knew because of the camera network they had established across the landscape as part of a long-running study into predator coexistence. It was that camera network that captured everything. The tiger had been in the area for 3 years. Adult male. Estimated weight somewhere between 200 and 220 kilograms. He had been photographed hundreds of times across the study area. The researchers knew his territory intimately, knew his preferred routes between water sources, knew the rocky outcrop where he liked to rest during the midday heat, knew the stretch of stream bank where he hunted most frequently. He was a known quantity, predictable in the way that apex predators with established territories tend to be. He had never shown any particular reaction to the dholes before. There had been a handful of camera trap images over the previous 2 seasons, showing his prints overlapping with theirs near water sources, suggesting they used the same routes at different times. There was no evidence of direct interaction. In a landscape large enough and in country where a tiger is unambiguously the dominant force, there is often simply no intersection. The tiger does what it does. The dholes do what they do. The forest is big enough to accommodate both. But territories shift. Prey moves seasonally. And in the dry season, when water sources concentrate both predators and prey into a smaller effective area, the margins between territories compress, and sometimes things collide. The sequence begins at 06:14 in the morning, when the light is still low and amber, and the forest is full of the sounds of the early day. The camera positioned at a known chital feeding area on the eastern edge of the study zone picks up the pack moving through in single file, heads low, moving with purpose. They have been hunting. The lead animal, a large female that the researchers had catalogued as the pack's dominant individual, is carrying herself with the particular loose-limbed confidence of a predator in its own territory after a successful night. 2 of the younger pack members carry visible blood on their muzzles. The pack had fed recently. They crossed the camera frame in 43 seconds, 14 animals, moving quiet, moving together, disappearing into the tree line to the south. What the cameras on the south transect pick up 11 minutes later changes the register of the footage entirely. The tiger appears from the west. He has been moving along the stream corridor, his usual route at this time of morning. heading toward a rocky section of the bank where he rests and drinks. He moves with that combination of absolute physical confidence and complete relaxed attention that healthy large cats project. He is not hunting. He is not alarmed. He is simply moving through his territory on a morning like every other morning. He reaches the stream edge and drinks. The camera angle is almost directly lateral, and the resolution is clear enough to see the muscles moving in his jaw, the water droplets falling from his chin. He drinks for approximately 90 seconds. Then he raises his head. The Dholes are coming from the east, not running, not bounding through the undergrowth in the loud, chaotic way of animals in panic, moving in that swift, controlled, purposeful trot that is their default mode of operation. And they are fanning out. The pack that crossed the first camera in single file is spreading laterally as it approaches the stream, and the spread is not random. The larger animals are taking the wider flanking positions. The faster, younger individuals are maintaining the central line. Someone, through those whistles, through the constant quiet acoustic exchange that has been running through this whole sequence, is organizing this. The tiger sees them when they are perhaps 30 meters away. His body language changes instantly and completely. He goes from relaxed to absolutely still. Not flight, not aggression, just that sudden crystalline focus of a predator that has encountered something it needs to evaluate very carefully. For a moment, nothing moves, and then the lead female makes a sound, not a whistle, a lower, more percussive vocalization that researchers who have reviewed the audio have described as something between a bark and a cough, and the pack accelerates. What follows lasts 4 minutes and 22 seconds of direct camera time across 3 overlapping camera positions. 4 minutes and 22 seconds that researchers have watched hundreds of times, freeze-framing and annotating, arguing about and marveling at. The pack does not charge in a single mass. It never does. The flanking animals curve wide, moving to get behind the tiger's line of retreat, not cutting off his escape, but making it complicated, making any direction he chooses to move a direction in which there are dogs. The central group drives forward, and it is the lead female and 2 of the largest males who push closest, who get within 5, 6, 7 meters of an animal that could kill any one of them with a single strike. The tiger turns to face the nearest threat. He faces the lead female. He does not flee, and he does not immediately attack. And this is where the footage becomes so remarkable. Because a tiger of this size, in full health, has the physical capacity to end the threat that individual animal poses. One swipe, properly landed, would be decisive. And yet he does not swing. He is doing the same calculation the female is doing. He is assessing. He is reading the situation. And the situation, as he reads it, is this. Wherever he turns, there are dogs. 2 on his left flank, 40 degrees off his shoulder, 3 behind him and to the right, the central group pressing from directly ahead. He turns to address one threat, and the flanking animals tighten. He swings his weight left, and the animals on that side split, one going low and forward, one pulling wider, never quite in reach but never retreating either. He makes a short rush at the lead female, explosive, covering the distance between them in a fraction of a second. She leaps backward, sideways, and 2 of the central pack members dart forward into the space his rush has opened behind him. He spins. He is now turned partially away from the lead female, who recovers and drives forward again. He swings back. He is being moved, incrementally, through these tiny forced turns, these small retreats and recoveries. He is being moved away from the stream, away from his rest point, away from the direction he chose to travel this morning. The Dholes are not fighting the tiger, they are redirecting him. The distinction matters enormously. A researcher who has spent 15 years studying large predator behavior in this ecosystem said this when reviewing the footage. She said the pack was demonstrating something that required not just coordination, but a kind of predictive modeling of the tiger's likely responses, that the flanking animals were positioning not for where the tiger was, but for where the tiger was about to be, that this implied a level of collective situational awareness that went beyond anything she had assumed modules were capable of. Another researcher, a predator behaviorist who had worked extensively in Africa with wild dogs and hyenas, said that the geometry of the pack's positioning at the moment of the tiger's first rush was almost identical to the geometry he had documented in African wild dog packs managing encounters with lions. Not similar in broad outline. Almost identical. Two species separated by continents and millions of years of divergent evolution had arrived at the same tactical solution to the same tactical problem, which told him, he said, that this was not improvisation, this was not accident, this was deep structure, this was something encoded in what these animals are. The tiger makes 4 distinct rushes over the 4 minutes and 22 seconds. Each one is directed at the nearest and most pressing threat. Each one is met with the same response. The target animal retreats. The flanking animals tighten. The rush is absorbed and reversed into a new positioning disadvantage for the tiger. By the end of the second rush, he is 6 meters from where he began. By the end of the fourth, he is 18 meters from the stream, facing into the forest, with the pack between him and the water. He stops. The lead female stops. There is a pause that lasts 11 seconds, and in that pause the tiger and the female are looking directly at each other, and neither one is moving, and the rest of the pack is still. 11 seconds of what one researcher called the most concentrated moment of interspecies negotiation she had ever seen on camera. And then the tiger turns and walks into the forest, not running, not fleeing in the broken, desperate way of prey animals. He walks. He disappears between the trees at the same steady, dignified pace he uses when he is simply crossing territory. Only his tail, held slightly lower than usual, carries any trace of what has just happened. The pack does not follow. The lead female watches the space where he disappeared for a moment, and then she turns back toward the stream. The pack converges. Several animals drink. The younger members circle and sniff each other with the excited, loose energy of animals that have done something and know it. Within 10 minutes, they are resting in the shade at the stream edge, as calm as if nothing had happened. The tiger was photographed by a camera on the western transect 40 minutes later. He was moving at his normal pace. He showed no signs of injury. He showed no signs of anything except a tiger crossing his territory on an ordinary morning. The researchers spent weeks discussing what the footage meant, not just what happened, mechanically, physically, but what it revealed about the nature of these two animals and how they relate to each other and to the landscape they share. The tiger is not diminished by this encounter. That is important to understand. He is not shown to be weak or cowardly, or somehow less than what he is. What the footage shows is a supremely intelligent predator making an accurate real-time cost-benefit calculation. The Dholes represent a credible threat, not because any one of them could harm him seriously. A healthy 200-kilogram tiger can absorb a dhole bite and be inconvenienced by it. But 14 animals in coordinated aggressive contact represent a genuinely dangerous situation. Every rush he makes exposes his flanks. Every focus on one threat exposes him to others. The cost of escalation is a body covered in bites, a possible injury to a leg or foot from an animal behind him, and all of this in the service of maintaining access to a single rest point on a stream that has a dozen other suitable points along its length. The calculation is straightforward, not worth it, and he makes the calculation quickly and he acts on it cleanly. That is intelligence. The Dholes are doing something equally intelligent, but structurally more complex. Each individual animal is tracking its own position, the tiger's position, and the positions of at least several packmates simultaneously. It is processing the tiger's attention and body language to predict where the next threat will be directed. It is making micro-adjustments to its own position based on what it perceives the tiger is about to do. And it is doing all of this in real time, in a chaotic environment with an animal that could kill it, while maintaining its own nerve and its own role in the collective strategy. This is what the research community found so startling. Not the outcome. The outcome, in hindsight, has precedent. There are historical accounts from British colonial-era naturalists of dholes harassing tigers. There are anecdotal reports from forest guards and trackers going back generations. The possibility that dholes could drive a tiger from something was not new. What was new was seeing it in enough detail, from enough angles, with enough temporal resolution to actually analyze the mechanism, to see that it was not chaos, to see that it was not a panicked mob accidentally overwhelming an apex predator through sheer number, to see that it was organized, to see the geometry, the anticipation, the tactical adjustment, to see that the pack was, in some meaningful sense, thinking together. The question of how dholes evolved this capability takes us back a long way. Back before the forests of central India, before the Deccan Plateau, before the current configuration of the Asian subcontinent, to the world that shaped these animals. Dholes emerged during the Pleistocene, when Asia was a landscape of dramatic climatic and ecological oscillation. Ice ages contracted forests into refugia and expanded grasslands. Warming periods reversed the process. The prey communities that dholes hunted shifted in composition and distribution with each cycle. The predator communities they competed and coexisted with were different from today's. There were lions in India then. There were giant hyenas. There were Pleistocene tigers that were, in some lineages, even larger than today's. And there were dholes, navigating all of it. The fossil record shows dholes were once far more widespread than they are today. Their bones have been found across Europe, across China, across island Southeast Asia, across what is now the Americas in the form of closely related species. At some point in the deep past, representatives of this lineage reached and colonized vast swathes of the world. What drove them from most of those places is still debated. Climate change, competition with expanding wolf populations in some regions, the arrival of modern humans in others. But the Indian subcontinent held them, and in that holding, in those millions of years of evolution against tigers and leopards and the other dominant predators of the Asian forest, the pack intelligence that we see in that camera footage was forged. Because pack intelligence is expensive. It is metabolically expensive to maintain the brain capacity that real-time collective coordination requires. It is behaviorally expensive to sustain the tight social bonds that make coordinated action possible. It is ecologically expensive to hold the territory and maintain the prey density that a pack of this size needs. You do not evolve this level of collective complexity unless it pays. And in a landscape dominated by tigers, in a predator guild where the apex animal can kill you individually with casual efficiency, the payoff is obvious. The pack is the solution to the tiger. The pack is what makes the dhole possible. Watching the dholes at the stream after the tiger has withdrawn, you see the social bonds that underpin all of this. The animals rest in contact with each other, sides touching, heads resting on neighboring bodies. They groom. They play at the margins of rest and wakefulness, the younger animals tumbling over each other in the water's edge. The lead female moves through the group, and each animal she passes touches her briefly, a nose to her flank, a head briefly under her chin. It is affectionate and calm, and it looks, in the most literal way, like a family. Dholes breed cooperatively. The dominant pair produces the litter, but the entire pack raises the pups. Pack members that have not bred, that have no direct genetic stake in the survival of these particular offspring, will spend hours at the den, will regurgitate food for pups that are not their own, will lie with them in the heat of the day, will play with them in the long twilight hours that mark the end of the dry season. And this is not altruism in any naive sense. This is the logic of inclusive fitness, of the genetic advantages that flow to individuals who sustain the pack, because without the pack there is no survival. The individual dhole that defects from cooperative behavior, that refuses to share food or guard the den or contribute to collective hunts, is not a successful rogue. It is a dead animal. The pack is survival. The pack is everything. This is what makes the encounter at the stream so layered in meaning. When the lead female drives forward toward the tiger, she is not acting alone in any real sense. She is the tip of a collective action. The animals behind her, the ones holding the flanking positions, are what make her advance possible. She can be aggressive because she knows she is not alone. She can maintain her nerve because the whistles around her tell her where everyone is, tell her the flanks are held, tell her the pressure is coordinated and sustained. Strip away the pack and she is a 20-kilogram animal facing a 200-kilogram one. The math is catastrophic. With the pack, the math is entirely different. There is a moment in the footage that nobody who has watched it forgets. It comes during the second of the tiger's 4 rushes. He comes fast and hard, and the target animal leaps back as they all have been doing. But this time, one of the younger pack members, a male probably in his 2nd year, does not move back with the retreating animal. He holds his position. He stands his ground 6 meters from a charging tiger, and he does not move. For approximately 1.5 seconds he is the closest animal to the tiger. He is looking directly at him. His tail is up, his whole body is forward, and the tiger pulls the rush. He stops before he reaches the young male. He stops and he pivots, and the flanking animals tighten, and the sequence continues. The researchers argue about that moment. Some say the tiger pulled the rush because the flanking threat had already changed the calculus, that he was never really committed to that direction. Some say the young male's unexpected stillness broke the tiger's expectation in a way that introduced a moment of uncertainty, and that moment of uncertainty was enough to abort the rush. Some say it is impossible to know what a tiger in that moment is processing, and that reading intention into it is a projection. But the young male's response in the immediate aftermath is unambiguous. As the tiger pivots away, the young male's body language releases in a fraction of a second. His tail drops slightly, his head comes up, he moves back into the pack formation, and 2 of the adult animals flank him briefly, bodies pressing against his sides, not restraining him. Something else. Something that reads, in the language of mammalian social bonding, like acknowledgement. One of the researchers wrote, in a paper that generated considerable discussion in the field, that what she saw in that moment was something the literature on canid cognition does not have a fully adequate vocabulary for. She used the phrase social reinforcement of individual bravery. She noted that the adult animal's contact with the young male, after his moment of stillness, was not random, not the incidental contact of animals in close proximity, but directed, brief, and immediately sequential to his action. She noted that this kind of social feedback to courageous or cooperative behavior in the context of collective action is something we are better at recognizing in primates, in elephants, in cetaceans, than in canids, and that the footage suggested it was worth looking harder. That paper was contested. The methodology of attributing intentionality to the contact behavior was questioned. The sample size was one event. The researchers who critiqued it made valid points. This is how science is supposed to work. But even the critics acknowledged that the footage as a whole demanded a re-examination of assumptions about Dholes cognition and collective behavior that the field had been comfortable with for too long. The Dholes spent 2 more hours at the stream. They hunted that evening, taking a chital in the grassland margin on the northern edge of their territory. The camera that caught the kill recorded the whole pack feeding together, the usual organized chaos of a canid group at a carcass, dominant animals feeding first but not monopolizing, younger animals slipping in at the margins, the constant movement and vocalization that keeps the whole group informed of what is happening. Nothing about the evening hunt or the feed suggested anything out of the ordinary. They had done what they needed to do that morning and then they moved on. The tiger was photographed at the stream the following morning. He was alone. He drank from the same spot. He rested on the same rocky section of bank. His world had resumed its normal shape. He would hold this territory for another 18 months before dispersing, following the pattern of adult male tigers in this landscape. moving out to find an uncontested range of his own. The Dholes were photographed in this area for another 3 seasons, the pack growing and splitting and reforming in the complex social dynamics that characterize stable dhole populations in good habitat. The footage became a reference point, not just in the academic literature, but in the broader conversation about how we understand predator relationships in complex ecosystems. Because one of the things it illustrated so vividly is that the hierarchy of the food chain is not a simple linear ordering with one species always dominant. It is a dynamic, context-dependent web in which physical size and individual killing power are only two of many variables, and in which social intelligence can shift the effective balance of power in ways that simple body mass measurements would never predict. The tiger is the apex predator of the Indian forest. That is true. In any direct one-on-one contest between a healthy tiger and a healthy dhole, the outcome is not in question. The tiger is stronger, faster at short range, and equipped with weapons that are simply on a different scale. But the dhole does not engage in one-on-one contests with tigers. It never has. It exists in a niche that sits alongside the tigers, overlaps with it in some ways, and has been refined over millions of years to exploit precisely the kind of collective action that the tiger, for all its magnificence, cannot match. This is one of the deepest lessons the natural world keeps teaching us. In forest after forest, ecosystem after ecosystem, on land and in the ocean, raw power is one solution, collective intelligence is another, and in the long run, in the evolutionary long game, collective intelligence has a remarkable track record. The dhole is, by almost every measure that does not involve individual body mass or direct killing power, in trouble. Its range has collapsed catastrophically over the last century. It once occupied a territory stretching from the Russian Far East, across China and Southeast Asia, through the Indian subcontinent. Today it is largely confined to fragmented pockets of habitat in South and Southeast Asia, with a global population estimated somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 individuals. The IUCN lists it as endangered. The trajectory is not encouraging. The causes are the ones that have become grimly familiar to anyone who has spent time paying attention to the wild world. Habitat loss, as the forests that sustained the prey communities that sustained the packs have been cleared for agriculture, fragmented by roads and development, degraded by logging. Prey depletion, as the deer and wild pigs that form the foundation of the dhole's diet have been hunted or simply disappeared from landscape after landscape. Direct persecution, as dholes have historically been killed by farmers protecting livestock, killed by hunters competing for the same prey, and killed as part of organized predator control programs that viewed them, inaccurately and destructively, as vermin. And disease, particularly canine distemper transmitted from domestic dog populations in villages that increasingly penetrate into forest edges, which has devastated local dhole populations across their range. There is something particularly tragic about the trajectory of an animal that has demonstrated, on camera, the kind of collective intelligence we see in that footage, facing threats of this character. Because the threats the dhole faces are not things that collective intelligence can solve. The pack cannot organize against a chainsaw. The pack cannot coordinate a response to an epidemic of distemper spreading through their numbers from dogs in a nearby village. The pack cannot do anything about the loss of prey species that takes the nutritional foundation of their world away. The sophisticated social technology that makes the dhole what it is, that allowed that pack to redirect a tiger, is irrelevant to these problems. They need something else to solve these ones. They need us to be smarter about what we are doing. The good news, and there is some, is that where dholes receive protection, where their habitat is maintained and their prey is stable, they recover. They are not ecologically fragile animals. They are highly adaptive. They can shift prey species as availability changes. They can modify territory size to match prey density. Packs can split and reform in response to landscape changes. They are built for variability. What they cannot do is persist in landscapes where there is simply nothing left for them, where the forest is gone, and the prey is gone, and the dogs from the villages carry disease into what fragments remain. Several protected areas in India now support stable, well-monitored dhole populations. The Nagarhole and Bandipur complex in Karnataka, Kanha and Pench in Madhya Pradesh, Kaziranga, where the dholes share extraordinarily diverse habitat with elephants and rhinos and tigers. In some of these places, the packs have been studied for long enough that researchers know individual animals across multiple generations, can trace social relationships and pack dynamics over years, can watch pups that were born into the pack become the adults that lead the hunts, can document the transmission of learned behavior from generation to generation. Because that is another thing that the footage at the stream suggests, something that the researchers discuss quietly because the implications are significant and the evidence is necessarily indirect. The quality of the pack's response to the tiger, the geometry of it, the discipline of it, the tactical sophistication, did not feel like behavior that was simply instinctive in the way that simple reflexes are instinctive. It felt learned. It felt like the kind of thing that is transmitted, not through genes alone, but through experience, through observation, through the slow accumulation of knowledge across generations of a stable social group. Young dholes spend a long time in the pack before they hunt as full contributors. The den period is extended. The period of dependent learning is long by canid standards, and during that time, the pups are watching everything. They are watching the adults hunt. They are watching the adults interact with each other. They are watching the adults navigate encounters with other predators, with territorial neighbors, with the full complexity of life in a forest that also contains tigers and leopards and elephants and sloth bears. Whether they are accumulating specific tactical knowledge in the way we would recognize as learning is impossible to prove from the footage alone. But the young male who stood his ground during the tiger encounter, who held his position 6 meters from a rushing tiger, was doing something. And the adult animals who pressed their bodies briefly against his in the aftermath were doing something. And if neither of those things means anything, if they are both just noise, then a great deal of what we thought we understood about canid social behavior needs to be rethought. More likely, they mean something. More likely, that young male was applying something, drawing on observations and experiences within his pack, and the adults were responding in a way that reinforced the behavior and embedded it more deeply. More likely, the pack that faced the tiger at the stream carried within its collective memory and behavior a tradition of dealing with exactly this kind of encounter, a tradition that had been shaped by generations of dholes in this forest facing exactly this situation. More likely, what we saw in that footage was not just an event, not just a remarkable morning at a stream in central India, but the visible edge of something much deeper, much older, much harder to measure, and much more extraordinary. The forest where this happened is still standing. The pack is still there, or a descendant of it is. The cameras are still running. Somewhere in the sal trees and the dry grasslands, and along the rocky stream margins of that study area, dholes are moving this morning in their fluid single file, exchanging those high-pitched whistles that carry the information of the hunt, spreading laterally as they approach prey, coordinating through sound and memory and collective intelligence shaped by millions of years into something that can make a tiger reconsider. And somewhere in that same forest, the tiger is moving too. 200 kilograms of perfect solitary predator, absolute in his own power, unchallenged by any single animal on earth, moving through a landscape that he shares, whether he acknowledges it or not, with something that operates on a completely different principle, something that has found, in cooperation, a kind of power that makes the pure arithmetic of body mass look like a very incomplete account of what the natural world is capable of. The researchers who first watched that footage, who sat in front of their screens in the early hours of a morning and saw a tiger walk away from a pack of 20-kilogram wild dogs, said different things about what they felt in that moment. Some of them used technical language. Some of them talked about predator-prey dynamics and interspecific competition and cognitive load in collective action contexts. But several of them, when pressed, said something simpler. They said it was one of the most extraordinary things they had ever seen from the natural world. They said it reminded them of why they had come to this work in the first place, of what had made them want to spend their lives in forests with cameras and notebooks, trying to understand what was happening between the trees when nobody was watching. It reminded them that the forest has been solving problems for longer than we have existed, with tools we have barely begun to understand, and that if we are paying attention, really paying attention, it will keep showing us things that stop us cold. The dhole is still here, against the odds, against the contraction of its range and the loss of its prey, and the encroachment of a human world that has not always treated it kindly. The dhole is still here, running through forests that have held its kind for millions of years, whistling through the sal trees in the early morning, fanning out toward prey, or toward a tiger, with that coordinated discipline that still astonishes the people who watch it. That is worth paying attention to. That is worth protecting. And if the footage from that camera in the central Indian forest does nothing else, if its only contribution is to make a few more people understand what exactly is at stake in the survival of this animal, then those 4 minutes and 22 seconds will have done something that matters. The pack moves on through the forest. The tiger rests on his rocky bank in the morning sun. The sal trees hold the light and the sound of the birds and the quiet exchange of those extraordinary whistles, carrying information through the trees, keeping the pack together, keeping the ancient intelligence of this animal alive in the landscape that made it.